I sat down with the commissioner of the Vermont Department of Labor, Kendall Smith, who says they're working to get more people to live and work in Vermont like Caleb and Jaden.
Kendall, thank you so much for being with us on In Depth.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Talk to me about the most in-demand jobs in Vermont right now.
Absolutely. So there's 5 core sectors that we're really focused on at the Vermont Department of Labor, along with our partners at the State Workforce Development Board and the Agency of Commerce. Those are the skilled trades, healthcare, IT and tech, manufacturing, and leisure and hospitality. Of course, within those sectors, there are all sorts of occupations, right? Healthcare, a huge field, leisure and hospitality, what does that even mean? Think about our ski resorts, our large tourism market, retail, trades, you have electricians, you have plumbers, you have HVAC. So obviously there is some nuance and variation, but those 5 sectors right now are the most in demand in Vermont, and where we're trying to direct Vermonters to put their attention and their interest if they're seeking a new job, a career change, graduating high school. Those are the areas that we have the most need and the most growth opportunities right now.
Has that list changed at all within the last few years?
Honestly, I would say that's been a pretty stable list. Probably the newer entrant onto it would be the IT, tech, and cyber field. Although that might be debated, we've been a great hub for remote workers in that field for quite some time, and we've seen people move into state that have the ability to work from home, but are in that field from companies located out of state. So there might be somebody out there that disagrees with me on that statement, but the other 4 have been very stable for us over the past decade plus.
Talk to me about the need and the goal to keep people in Vermont and to sustain those jobs in the state.
Sure. So every sector I go out and I visit with businesses almost every day has a need for workers. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to somebody in healthcare or somebody that owns their own manufacturing business or their own retail store. They need workers. And the fact of the matter is, even if we took all the unemployed Vermonters and we hired them tomorrow, there would still be a gap in terms of how many people we need in terms of filling all the open jobs. So we have a need to both help those Vermonters that are already here have the careers that they desire, and we'll provide them that security and employers the ability to grow. But the fact of the matter is we have to do more to encourage people to relocate to Vermont. We're not having the babies at the rate we used to have to fulfill and grow our own crop from all those that are retiring, and we have to attract more people to live and work here. And when we talk about workforce now, that conversation has evolved. It's not just how do we train people. Things are constantly coming up like housing, where I talk to employers and they're saying one of the biggest barriers I have is actually I have somebody that might be willing to move here, whether it's relocating in state or from out of state, and it's housing, it's affordability, it's childcare. So the kind of guardrails around what is workforce and what is workforce policy continue to expand and ripple out, which makes the conversation both more dynamic and sometimes harder to navigate.
Talk to me about the tech schools in the state and how the department works to specifically encourage those students, those new graduates, to find work here.
Absolutely. So we have a huge focus on partnering with our CTE centers and our adult ed programs around the state to help people transition from graduation into employment with other partners across state government, including Hireability, the Agency of Education, as well as external groups like Advance Vermont and Graduate with a Plan and others work to go into these schools and illuminate those opportunities for students that are here in their community. The Department of Labor specifically has 10 regional job centers around the state that have a pulse on what's happening in those local communities and those regions, and they partner with those other community stakeholders to go in and do that one-on-one help to youth for transitioning again into their next step. And what that next step looks like can vary, and that's great and that's okay, and they all have value. So when I think about those graduating out of tech centers, often the next step is a registered apprenticeship or direct to employment. Sometimes it can be higher education and training. All of those are valuable, all of those are necessary, all of those are good. There's no right or wrong answer in terms of, well, do I go right into the workforce? Do I go to college? Do I do a registered apprenticeship? They all have value, and we want to help people get to what's going to make them ultimately successful.
How is the department tackling AI relevancy? It's a big topic right now, especially for students who are graduating, entering a workforce, and the topic is already about this technology potentially replacing jobs. So how is the department ensuring that that doesn't happen in multiple sectors?
That is the question of the hour, right? We're hearing it more and more, we're seeing it more and more in terms of AI becoming a growing factor in employment. There's one thing though I would start right off by saying, AI is never going to replace human discernment, human judgment, and human professional soft skills. So I think about there's one really foundational piece of this puzzle that's actually becoming more important and not less, which is, can you show up to work on time? Can you be a team player? Can you take and receive feedback and adapt? Can you communicate effectively? Those evergreen, durable, soft skills, there's many ways to describe them, are not going away. And for young people, for adults, for career changers, I would really encourage you to make sure that you have that ability to be accountable and be professional as your foundation, and then we can talk about layering the technical skills on top. And so when you come back to AI, AI is a tool. There is trends that we're watching around how does that shape work, how does that shape what jobs are available and what's needed. But almost every sector, AI can be applied. And what I think about is the saying that AI might not make your job go away, but somebody who knows how to use AI may replace you. So we think about how can we train people in AI literacy, in AI skill building, and there's still definitely work to be done there. There are many organizations across Vermont that are leaning into this. There are some school districts that are being a little bit more proactive about this than others, but I would encourage everybody to think about what can I do to make sure I have at least a basic grasp of what is AI and whatever sector I'm in, how it can be applied to the job that I'm doing to make me more efficient and to make me better. But I don't necessarily think there's a cause to panic, at least at the moment, that all the jobs are going to go away. The other thing I would just share from the Department of Labor is, AI is growing very quickly. I even think about what the job market looked like 20 years ago. So we're constantly thinking about how do we prepare people for jobs that don't exist yet, which can be a really interesting kind of thought question to go through. And that's where, again, I come back to where I started around those soft skills, those professional skills as the foundation. And then if you have that, you can layer whatever competencies and technical abilities you need from there.
What is your advice and what's your message to graduates? We're approaching graduation season, students graduating from high school and college. What do you have to say to them?
Most importantly, congratulations. You put in the work, you put in the time, and you made it, so congrats, first and foremost. When I think about high school students, there's no wrong step in terms of what's next. Stay engaged, stay curious, stay learning. If you want to go direct into employment, fantastic, you can learn on the job. If you want to go to college or higher ed and training, that is fantastic, and there's lots of financial aid available to make that happen if needed. Registered apprenticeship is something that we're really big on from the Vermont Department of Labor, so you can earn while you learn and be able to end with a certification that's portable and transferable. If you need a gap year to figure out what's next, that's okay too. It is okay to take your time and be thoughtful about what your future holds. And for our college graduates that are here in Vermont, please stay here. We need you here. We need your energy. We need your innovation. We want you in our communities. Vermont's a really great place to have that first job. And I think our scale of being small can actually be an advantage because it means you're more likely to be able to have an impact if that's important to you, and you're more likely to be able to get that mentorship from the adults that are going to be in the workplaces with you. And when we think about our demographics, we're going to have a huge wave of retirements in the next 10 years. It's already started, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity here for you to continue to grow and progress in your desired careers.